when you are shortened on a course, the rule is as follows. It's set up so that wherever you're going next, if you keep sailing the course, you will sail it correctly. Okay, so do not change it. So if you're on a K3, okay, so K3, start K to port, X to starboard, K to port, finish. And we get up around K and the wind dies. You take K to port and you're headed X to starboard, okay? That means that if you rounded X to starboard, you're going to finish correctly, okay? The obvious one is, what about K2? Okay, so you go up the K to port, gate, bell buoy, finish. That's K2. So you start between G and F, go up around K, and the wind dies, and I shorten the course. You're headed downwind, and it's like, where do we go? Well, the next spot on K2, it goes start K to port, gate, and the gate is between F and X. So if you cross between F and X, then you will finish correctly. That's the gate. Okay, so that's one option. And that's the only way you can finish that race correctly. The other option is if you are, again, have X to starboard, so a K3, so it's K port, X to starboard, K to port, X to starboard. If I shorten it after you round K and you're headed around X to starboard, it's between X and the flagpole. That's the one that always gets everybody. But the beauty of that is, as long as you take X to starboard, anywhere between literally hitting ground and X to starboard, you finish correctly. So people don't like that one because it's more tactical. Like, what if I shorten the course and it's super advantageous to finish over by G? Well, you can do that. But I am allowed to shorten the course anytime after the first boat rounds the previous mark and before they finish. And so I could shorten it 10 boat lengths before they're to X. Now I understand the implications that if I do that, that could hurt a boat that's, you know, headed towards X, and another boat thinking, well, I'm going to go to a G, he's probably going to shorten the course. You know, nobody knows the information except for me. I try to call it far enough in advance when I'm shortening at X, but I do the very best I can. And the goal is to get the race in the bag. So just understand, if your next mark is X to starboard, you can finish anywhere between X and the flagpole. Okay. What you don't do is you never go through the start finish line, except this, on a twice around course. Okay. On a twice around course, let's just go back to the sailing instructions. Twice around course, you are supposed to, let's see here. Where's the courses? Mark's courses. Here we go. Let's see here. When a letter T, 13.4, when a letter T placard follows the course number, the course shall be sailed 2 times around. The start finish line will be required at the beginning of the second lap. So if you're sailing a K2T, that means K, gate, bell buoy, finish, twice around, you got to sail K, gate, bell buoy, start, finish, K, gate, bell buoy. So if I shorten you after the first bell buoy rounding, just keep sailing and going through that start finish line, which addresses the second thorn. Do not forget, on a twice around, you must go through the start finish line. That has not been changed, and it still remains the rule. People on this call aren't going to get it wrong. So I just want to remind everybody of those 2 thorns. Okay, great. So I'm on to safety stuff now, and I am really going to try hard to get this meeting done by 6 o'clock, but I would like to take an opportunity to introduce Bill Guilfoyle, and we're going to talk about the vessel safety briefing. And if you'd be okay, Bill, maybe you can just talk briefly about how this came about and any experiences that you happen to have regarding this.
Okay, it's good to see everybody. I hope it's not too long before we're all seeing each other in the bar. And now it's good to know that when we meet in the bar and we've broken a rule, that we can, rather than go drop out, we just go to Brad and raise our yellow flag. So Brad called and asked me if I would talk about safety. And I thought maybe a good way to do it was to talk about a particular race where just about everything that would come up in a safety briefing came up in the course of the race. So in this particular race, it was the SoCal 300, and I think it was 2018. And we had a big breeze forecast, and the wind, like always, it started off kind of light inshore, but as we made our way across the channel, people started putting reefs in. The wind kicked up to a steady 30, gusting 35 plus. And along the way, two boats had, well, it was interesting because before the race, at the skipper's briefing, we reviewed the weather and encouraged everyone to consider their capabilities. And one of the, Brad, what rule is it? That is it rule 3? The decision to
Decision to
race?
race?
Yeah.
Yeah, rule 3 now. Yes.
Yeah. So, it's the inescapable responsibility of the skipper to decide whether or not they're up to race. And recently there's been a move towards doing shortened courses and things. And the problem with shortened courses is that it's a slippery slope. Anytime the wind's up, people are going to be pressured to go to a shortened course, and then we're never going to get a chance to sail in big breeze. And if you're not going to send someone on a race that's 200 miles on the backside of these islands, how are you going to send them to Hawaii 2,200 miles? Where are they going to get their experience and practice, sailing in big breeze? So at the beginning of this race, we did a safety briefing, and right away, one of the boats, probably the top boat in the fleet, Horizon, some of you may know it, a Santa Cruz 50 that has an incredible race record. They decided not to race because they were down a crew member. And it was a critical crew member, and so they dropped out before they ever left the dock. There was another boat that was, I won't mention any names, but there's another boat that was clearly not well prepared because they were recruiting crew off the dock the day of the race, the morning of the race. And they had a new sail that had just been delivered, and it was off another boat and didn't actually fit the boat they were sailing. They started the race, and then they ended up dropping out before they got to Santa Cruz Island. As we came around the island, the breeze was big, and a boat that was right behind us peeled from one spinnaker to the other. And in those conditions, often, and I know Marcel's on here, often in those conditions, we'll decide not to do a peel, but to just do a bareheaded change because it's safer. These guys did a peel, and by the way, all these things sort of fall in the category of but for the grace of God. This stuff can happen to anybody, and small things turn out to be big things when the wind's blowing, and they tend to cascade. So this is a perfect example of a cascading event. Something small goes wrong and it cascades into something much bigger and life-threatening. So in this case, they decided to do a peel. In the course of the peel, the kite that was coming down shrimped. The kite that was going up shrimped off the side of the boat. The foredecks, one of the foredeck guys' leg got wrapped in the sheet, and it dragged him all the way to the back of the boat and almost off of the boat. And by the time we looked back, we could see that the original spinnaker was flying with no sheets attached to the boat, flying off the masthead of the boat. And we really didn't have any idea what was going on at that point. And a few minutes later, we heard the radio light up, and they were looking for help because this line had cinched around his leg so tight that it was the diameter of his bones rather than the skin. And ultimately, he had to get airlift rescue off the boat. A little while later, as the sun was going down, we had our hands full on Prevail, and we just decided, and because we had two new people on the boat, we were down a man, and we decided when the sun went down, we were going to drop the kite and just sail without a spinnaker until the wind calmed down. And at the time we made that decision, we were leading our fleet. The boat another Santa Cruz 52 that we're primarily racing against had 5 professional sailors on it, and they kept their kite up and didn't have any problems. And then further down the course, in the middle of the night, probably midnight or 1 in the morning, one of the boats jibed at Cordes Bank, and a woman who was tending the runners got hit in the back of the head with the boom and forced her forehead down onto a winch and fractured her skull. And she ended up having to get airlifted off the boat as well. So it was a pretty dramatic race. I think there was one other boat that had a steering cable break. So these things happen. And when we got back to the dock, one of the things that we did is we got together with the guys at San Diego Yacht Club, and we got 2 people from every boat into a room, and we did a debrief. And everybody shared their experience. And one of the things that came out of that was we put together this vessel safety brief, which is a document that I think Brad will make available to you. But it was based on the input of some really experienced, capable, professional offshore sailors everyone sharing their experience of what happened on the race. And it's a great tool to use as at least as a starting point to think about having safety briefings in the cockpit before you leave the dock. And it's a good way to walk your crew through, what to expect. So in our case, we'll talk about, the first thing is, do you have all the right people on the boat to do everything? In our case, on that race, we decided we didn't. And so we didn't carry a spinnaker for, I think, maybe 4 hours. And the funny thing about that is it was like the best night of sailing. It was relaxing because we didn't have a spinnaker up. We were going fast and surfing off the waves, and we ended up fourth. We ended up second in class and fourth overall. So it was like we didn't even sacrifice that much in terms of our position. And the next thing is to say, okay, what's this race course look like? And get your sails lined up and sort of map everything out so everybody knows what to expect. And I won't go through all of it here, but it's really a good tool. And even if you're sailing around the buoys, it's a good idea to get the crew together in the cockpit, make sure people know where the safety equipment is. One of the things we learned at one of the safety seminars we went to was the suggestion that everybody on the boat go through and touch every piece of safety equipment. It's not enough to say the fire extinguisher is over there. If you go and you touch it, if you touch the medical kit, if you identify where the radio is, you're much more likely under stress to be able to find it and do what needs to be done. So, all of that's just a sort of long-winded way of saying there's this resource here, and for anybody who's sailing offshore, I'd highly recommend it. It's not the end all, and it doesn't fit every situation, but it's a good starting point to think about how you would do a safety briefing in the cockpit before the race. And even for wet Wednesdays, it's, you might want to develop something similar so that inevitably bad things can happen. And when they do, the boats that are prepared tend to avoid those cascading situations where, people get hurt or worse. So Brad, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Thank you very much. So are you guys seeing this vessel safety brief right now, Bill, on your screen?
Yes, we are.
All right, cool. So this is on our sailing resources page, and I'm going to go ahead and I'll show you that in a second, but I'm not going to go through everything here. But I agree with Bill. This is a great resource for ocean racing, but honestly, this is a resource for racing. And I think if you look at it, and even just being in a wet Wednesday, the reason that we have this safety briefing tonight, and we had one in 2020 actually for the first time, was because 2019 was a very big year for us. We had somebody fall through a hatch. We had somebody fall, as they were doing some mast work that was inside the harbor, but we also had somebody have a heart attack. And so, understanding what you're getting into and knowing exactly what is on your boat and where is crucial to something else I'm going to show you as well. And Bill, I think it's okay if we don't go through all of this as long as I show them where this is, right?
Yeah, I think so. Okay,
great. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my share here, and then I'll show you where this is. And then if for some, I'm not 100% sure this is open to non-sailing or non-yacht club members, but I will make sure we get all of this safety stuff. But this is all on sbyc.org/sailing resources /sailing resources. And, of course, for those who didn't make the Dave Perry talks, you have the rules, learn to sail stuff for brand new people. But there's a safety tab here, and that's where our vessel safety briefing example is. And this is not for you to take and copy and paste. In fact, I think it's really important that you take it and dissect it and use it for your boat specifically, right? So you dissect it for your wet Wednesday race plan or whatever. Though most of us, that's what we do, right? Not everybody's doing offshore race week, but dissect it and change it so that you have something, not just a piece of paper like, oh yeah, I'm safe. Like actually dissect it, take out what, I don't need to go over that, but we do need to make sure we know this. All right, what I would like to go into next relates to this, but it's developing an emergency action plan. So to have a good emergency action plan, in my mind, you need to know where all your resources are, where all your items are, okay? If something were to happen and you get a severed finger, where's your first aid kit? Where is the items you would need to deal with that in immediate? And then how do you respond? So one of the things Bill said is that these folks had to be airlifted off their boat, right? So there's this aspect of the initial response on the boat, but part of that initial response is calling an authority that is a safety authority that's higher than us. And a lot of times in our case, it'd be like the Harbor Patrol at Wet Wednesday, if we're doing a Wet Wednesday race. But, you know, in the case of an offshore race, it's going to be the Coast Guard. So understanding who you're going to call is important. But for us, I just kind of want to give you some examples. The Santa Barbara Yacht Club has an emergency action plan for the race committee. And there's some good information here I just want to share real quick. And let me see, I'm going to share my screen one more time here. So we'll go to this guy here. I think this is it. Yes. Okay. Share. Okay, great. So hopefully you see our Santa Barbara Yacht Club emergency procedure. This is one of the 3 pages. And some of this stuff on here is really interesting because we have it set up so that you're calling the Santa Barbara Harbor Department first, okay? So, and we have a map where an ambulance might meet somebody. So if you were to have a medical emergency, whether it be something as serious as a heart attack or as slight as a sprained ankle or something like that, one of the things that was really important to know is that while developing this, the Harbor Patrol was real explicit. Do not call 911 yourself on your cell phone. Call us on channel 16. We will call 911. The reason that is that cell phone calls are routed through Bakersfield for 911 calls, but the landline at the Harbor Patrol would get to the local authorities much quicker. So you're cutting out a ton of time by calling the Santa Barbara Harbor Department. Additionally, they're going to understand where you are on the water, and they're going to say, okay, is this person, if it's not a heart attack, for instance, even if it is, you know, you need to know where you're going to take this person. And they've got 3 locations and you're welcome again I can send this file to anybody if you want to use it at all, but there's 3 locations. Let me just make sure everybody's seeing. I don't really know if I can switch screens like that. So I just want to make sure you're seeing the map here. The accommodation dock is one, and they might send you there if it's a non-life-threatening emergency and it's not you've got time, okay? Or the launch ramp. I've taken dinghy sailors to the launch ramp to meet an ambulance at the launch ramp. These are locations an ambulance can get to. The one that I like to point out is there's a lowering ramp on the east side of Stearns Wharf, and that ramp is the quickest way for an ambulance to get there because they don't have to go through parking lots weaving in and out to get in here into the harbor. Additionally, the Harbor Patrol can rip over to this at full speed versus they have a pretty strict, surprisingly strict, no wake policy even for themselves in the harbor, even when it comes to emergencies. And I found that surprising. Some of us might find that surprising, but they're pretty strict about it. So if time is of the essence, the Stearns Wharf may be where they send you. And the most important thing to understand is that communication with the Harbor Patrol at the front end of your emergency action plan, if you develop one, and I think you should, is to understand the communication with them at the front end is number 1, first and foremost. I'm also going to mention a couple other comments about the Harbor Patrol. They have an automatic, AED, external defibrillator. And that if you don't know what that is, it is one of those shockers that gets your heart attack rhythm. It shocks the heart to get the heart going in a proper rhythm again. And David's probably like, wow, Brad, good explanation there. But in general, that's what happens, right? And if you've taken a CPR course, you know how to use these things. So for those who are interested in knowing, Bill actually has one on his boat. He told me that. And you can get them at Costco. I don't actually think they're expensive, but there are some out there that are reasonably priced. But the Harbor Patrol, if you don't have one, has one on their powerboat. So if you were to have a heart attack, that's the first thing you need. CPR is a life extension thing that will help you until the AED gets there. But if the AED does not get there, the chances of survival are slim to none. So it's very important to understand that if you're serious about getting to the next level, having somebody on your boat CPR trained is a goal that the safety committee has on every boat in Santa Barbara. That goal has been thwarted a bit by COVID, but we intend to try to get our trainings going again this year and try to offer as much as we can until every boat's got somebody who's CPR trained. We're not going to require it. We just want to make sure the education is out there and the opportunity is out there. So a couple of things I also want to mention is as you're thinking through an emergency action plan for your boat, and these are, I'll again show you where these are so you can look at them and dig through them and say, I'm going to use this, I'm not going to use that. And you're going to be able to critique ours as much as you want. When you're digging through it, I want you to think about your boat and as pertains to your boat. These were all as pertains to race committee. These are examples, not something to be copied, something to get you thinking. But on a Harbor 20, if you sail with 2 people regularly and one becomes incapacitated, who's going to steer the boat if you're going to start doing CPR or calling people on the radio? How is that going to work, right? So you might need to think through something different on a Harbor 20, like, do we have some kind of auto helm situation where I can at least tie the helm off while I call for help and then begin CPR for the time being? Or what's the process? It's going to be sails down, roll the jib up, whatever you got to do, right? So you need to work through that on each of your individual boats. And I'm not going to tell people how to do that because you know your boats better than I do. And we're not going to do that. It's not the goal of this meeting. It's to get you to think about, how would I respond to a severed finger, a rope wrapped around somebody's leg and tightened to the point of extreme pressure, or even worst case scenario, a heart attack or a man overboard person. So how am I going to respond to those? And those are part of having an emergency action plan. So once again, sailing resources on the SPYC page here. We've got some safety stuff up here. You can see I have a weather incident example, and that's really for when we're hosting an event with a bunch of dinghies and people could get separated from their boats easily. I also included the U.S. Coast Guard auxiliary. They have like float plans, the required items by the Coast Guard for your boat. I put on a man overboard example, and you'll notice all these say examples because, it's an example of what one might look like. It's not saying you should do it exactly that way. It's it's an example of it. And then of course the U.S. sailing safety equipment requirements, which is the last thing I wanted to visit. So we'll go ahead and pull that up real quick and make sure that you guys are seeing that screen. Should be boom. Okay, so I don't know who's familiar or not familiar with the U.S. sailing safety equipment requirements, but you all should be. The safety equipment requirements was brought about several years ago when it was kind of like, well, who's telling us what's safe and not safe? And each organizing authority had different things. And so, U.S. sailing essentially came up with a list. And here you can see monohull instructions, et cetera. Let's see, I think this takes us right to, yeah, perfect. It takes us up and says, okay, what kind of race is it? Is it an ocean, coastal, or near shore? For Wet Wednesday, we qualify that as near shore, and that's pretty obvious why. You pretty much swim to shore if you needed to, if you fell overboard. But it's got certain things check marked. So you could go through and look. You can see certain boxes are highlighted, and sometimes we might add in the sailing instructions a special thing like Rule 2.1.4 applies for near shore. So you need to make sure you read the safety section. Near shore is a lot more subject to the local authorities modifying it. And that's because San Francisco is way different than sailing in Santa Barbara. In San Francisco, I believe life jackets are required at all times on all boats. We don't require them here, but if I were to make one massive recommendation, if you really want to improve your safety, make sure you all have really good life jackets and be bold about wearing them sooner than later. Don't wait for it to be like, gosh, we probably should have wore our life jackets for that. Put them on early. You'll see the best racers do. Best racers wear their life jackets a lot. So anyway, this is the safety equipment requirements, and it's good to familiarize yourself with it and read through it and understand This was developed by US Sailing, and it is guidelines. They are guidelines that we use in all of our sailing instructions in Wet Wednesday and for the season. So everything we're talking about tonight really applies for the entire season. Oh yeah, I gotta unpin.
Hey,
Remove
hey, Brad,
spotlight.
can I just jump in real quick?
Yeah, sure.
I've spent a lot of time with those safety requirements over the years, and it's also a good read, even if you're not going on an ocean race, to just see what a properly outfitted boat looks like. You know, all of those things that are checked are required. And if you're buying a boat that you want to think about taking offshore at some point, you know, there's a lot in there that has to be satisfied that not all boats meet. So it's worth going. It's a good document, and if you want to be properly equipped, it's a good tool.
Yeah, I agree. So we've got the vessel safety brief, emergency action plans, and the safety equipment requirements. I just want to go over again really quick on that emergency action plan. One thing we learned when we had that extraordinarily unfortunate, John, I see your question. I'll get to it in a second here, or comment. That very unfortunate heart attack that happened 2 years ago. One thing we learned, in that you learn in CPR, maybe briefly for 1 second, it's mentioned, is how heavy an unconscious person is to move. So if you have, you know, if you feel, I think when you're looking at how you would respond to a CPR or a first aid, or excuse me, a heart attack on a boat, I think you should realize it is highly likely, unless it's a very small person, that you will need to have an AED administered on your boat. And that means that the Harbor Patrol will have to come out, get aboard your boat, and then start that process. They're not just going to hand off a person unconscious to them and they're going to floor it in and take care of the matter. That will happen if they're conscious. If they're unconscious, it might happen if they're conscious. Depends on if they have, you know, injuries that aren't stabilized, but like a broken back potentially. But if it's something where they're unconscious, think about where you would lay somebody down on a flat surface, if that's possible. How would that look? Also be aware that they're going to probably throw you a tow line. So you want to think about where you're gonna tie that tow line off to, because they're going to speed tow you as fast as they can to the location where the ambulance is. So they'll probably put somebody on your boat. And I'm not saying this exactly what's going to happen, but just be prepared for how that could look. And by being prepared and knowing that ahead of time, you're more likely to have success, I think. You know, there's no promises, right? We can never know what happens to us, and we're given what we're given. But I think ultimately thinking through possible scenarios ahead of time can at least make you feel more prepared and better, just ready for the situation a little bit better, as opposed to being like, what do I do? So I see John has a hand up. John, let's go ahead and hear what you got to say.
Sure, Brad. Great talk. Thank you, Bill. Good, very true stories there. Of the races that are calendared for 2021, I understand Wet Wednesdays are near shore. And I understand if we were doing a Transpac, that would be offshore. Are there any races in our, through the season which would qualify as coastal? I'm thinking like the Wilson Series or anything that's going out to the platform state. I mean, is there a actual mile or limit to what differentiates between nearshore and coastal?
So there's no specific mileage. It's an excellent question. It says coastal races not far removed from shorelines where rescue is likely to be quickly available. So after long discussions at Sail Policy, we decided that the towers or the platform, the tower races, are near shore, in that we believe rescue is likely to be quickly available. For the Santa Barbara to King Harbor, it is coastal. Okay, so that one is further away. Offshore Race Week is ocean, I believe. Or is that coastal? Actually, it might be coastal. Bill, do you remember?
I think I'd have to double check, but I know like Coastal Cup for sure is ocean.
Okay.
And I can't remember if SoCal 300 is ocean or coastal, but probably ocean because we're 100 miles offshore.
Right. So yeah. So I think the platforms are roughly what, 5 miles or something like that. Some 5, 6 miles. So we decided that was close enough to call it near shore. And we sometimes waive small little things that are required. Or we require a little more. Actually, in the tower races, we require a little bit more. If you check the tower race sailing instructions, they're slightly more strict than if you just go sailing in a wet Wednesday. So we added things in for that. And we continually, I literally every year end up changing that a little bit more. And the goal is to have just slightly, you know, safer standards and make sure that we're sort of meeting at least a baseline that feels, you know, safe for those conditions. And it's all within discussions of the safety committee and sail policy.
Great.
Great
Thank you.
question, John. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I'm pretty much at the end of the presentation here. I have one last thing I want to say for everybody before we give our thank yous. The first 3 races are called fun, but they don't count for season points for a reason. And one of the things that the sail policy wanted to see this year is instead of doing the man overboard at the end of the season, they want to do it at the beginning of the season. So we're going to start week 1. And I really like to try to change our frame of reference that week 1 through 3 is about shaking down your boat, is about making sure that you got some kind of a vessel safety briefing, even if it's like a really small thing. I mean, just start small and go there. Figure out, you know, what are some possible incidents that'll happen? What would I need to address those incidents? Make a list and start check marking them off one by one, you know, as the next 3 weeks go by. You know, God willing, there's not gonna be any incidents in the first 3 weeks of the season. But I think if we start focusing on preparing ourselves for any incidents, the likelihood they happen or the likelihood that we make them much less severe by being prepared is huge. I mean, really, really helpful. So these first 3 weeks are all about shakedown. Yes, we want to win. Yes, we want to get cups. But honestly, I'd rather give a cup to somebody who's, you know, the man overboard drill, or somebody who's like, look, here's my vessel safety brief. I wanted to show you. I'm going to give awards for those kind of things. So that's kind of a route we're going to go here. And I just wanted everybody to realize that. And I think that's kind of the format for the season. So when we get into scored events, we're kind of all ready. And then, you know, this is kind of the beginning of our season. You know, opening day happened, but Wet Wednesday is the beginning of the big amount of racing. Are there any other comments before we wrap up?
I just want to say thank you, Brad. This is Tom Hinkle.
Oh yeah, my pleasure.
Just wanted to say, you know, the sailing instructions, it's something you always kind of breeze through. You don't even look at them really.
Yeah, that's
true.
true.
Always be looking at that. I appreciate that remark there.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Thank you, everybody, so much. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure Bill would be more than happy to share information with you as well. I will be emailing out to everybody with a recording of this, as well as all the documents that we shared. So we wish you the very best Wet Wednesday season. We'll see you 1 week from now for your first shakedown race. Check out those vessel safety briefings. Good luck, everybody. Go Santa Barbara. We'll see you again this Wednesday.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, Brad.
My pleasure. Bye, everybody.